Mm. So, welcome, Dane Tomas. Welcome to
Hello.
Conversations on Soul. Thanks for being with me from your deep and dark chamber.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, I'd love to start by you talking a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world, and then we'll dive into whatever this conversation wants to be.
Hmm. You know, with the caveat that we're all nobody and everything's always changing and all that kind of thing. Um, I guess what I'm known for or how I explain myself when I'm doing something quote thing air quotes professional. It depends, but basically I've been a facilitator of some kind for nearly 25 years, I guess something like that. And that has taken me through the realms of personal development and kind of success culture into more spiritual territory and kind of like archetype work. I created a modality called the spiral, which I sold a couple of years ago, which was a kind of consciousness raising system. And I'm also pretty deeply involved with magic, the occult, esoteric systems of thought and practice of various kinds. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Comparative Religion when I was 20, which set me up to have an interesting worldview of different things. And so, really, and I also make music and art and centered around ritual. So, really, I just see myself as a creator and a facilitator, and, increasingly with a focus on magic and increasingly with a focus on working in the realms of temple culture and mystery schools and soul work and shadow work and um, the language, even the language I want to use around this is really often changing, but a lot of it is about finding integral and embodied ways to accelerate human awakening and human spiritual development. That's the
Mm.
kind of nerdy version. Yeah, and I've written a few books and made a few rap songs of late that have sort of esoteric and kooky, tantric and witchy themes. And yeah, I like making stuff.
Mm. Cool. Sounds like a rich picture. And I've been following you for a long time, so it's really good to be able to have a conversation with you and tease apart some of the things that I feel I'm vibing with you on, which is a lot about embodied spirituality. And we've kind of weaved or woven in the same circles for a while, and a natural part of the progression really through the awakening path, which is at the core what I'm interested in and why I'm doing all the work that I'm doing is actually in service to humanity's awakening, and then breaking that down to a human to human level. It means just supporting people to feel more fully themselves and feel more free. But yeah, where I feel we meet is this place around embodied spirituality, because what can happen is opening up to these expansive experiences, opening up to the soul, and actually then afterwards it's like, and what? Like, what do I do with it now? Either in a beautiful way, like, okay, I'm so open, my heart's open, and I want to create, and I just need to like land some part of myself deeper so that I can really be in the world and be in soul in a world that's not so open to soulful ways of living. And then there's the slightly more challenging ends of awakening, which is very common, which is being blasted open to deeper layers of your psyche, and who you thought you were has now disappeared. And actually, what then? And I'm also really interested in that transition time and supporting people through that kind of portal of crisis. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on embodied spirituality. Like, what do you mean by embodied spirituality, and how does your work support that?
I think, like a lot of people, I started with a more ascension based path, by which I mean things that were a lot about raising consciousness, becoming enlightened, etc. I remember being 17 and I just read Mantak Chia and telling my mum, I'm going to stop ejaculating so I can become an enlightened being, She's kind of like, that's nice, dear, kind of thing. But since my late teens, I've had an interest in sort of higher realms. I went to the Theosophical Society, um, you know, Psychedelics really helped me see glimpses of the non-dual reality, even though it sort of scared the shit out of me at first because I struggled to integrate, which I guess we're going to talk about. Um, but yeah, really, it all started with the idea of spirituality as kind of getting on a higher vibe, you know, moving towards a lighter frequency and
Mm,
sort of becoming quote unquote awakened, Buddhist
mm,
meditation, etc., etc. Um, I did a bunch of that. I think I got good at it, whatever that means. I've developed some to some degrees those aspects, those kind of mind and consciousness and spirituality in the higher sense. I definitely built some of that over a period. And then I kind of, I was only in my 20s and I wanted to do stuff in the world. And I could sort of sense and see that, like, in my sexuality, in my power in the world, in my ability to deal with money, in my physical embodiment, I just wasn't very anchored, you know?
mm.
I would see people that were a lot more athletically gifted than me and really in their matter, and I'd be like, this doesn't seem fair. You can just fucking grab shit and do shit. Why can't I do that? And people who were good at money, and I was like, I'm terrible at that. And I remember having, there was some connection to sexuality, but it was a little bit fraught. It was a little bit like if I was in a good flow or I had a good thing with someone, something beautiful could open. But other times I'd be a little bit restricted. And I guess the way I started to see it then was like I'm good at the higher chakras and I'm not so good at the lower chakras.
Mm,
And and then putting together the maths, like, doesn't matter how much fucking meditation I do, I'm not getting any better at bringing my purpose into the world.
mm,
I don't think I could. This is years of figuring out condensed into, fairly clear language. But I just had a sense of like, well, almost this entitled sense of like, I'm fucking special. I'm like clearly an enlightened, sensitive being. And I kind of suck at life actually compared to people
yeah.
like, and surely it should be getting better, but it almost seems like it's getting worse. And I remember like, I'd done like Reiki trainings and things and like going into a supermarket and being all like, oh, I can't handle the energies and stuff. And, that was almost like a mark of pride of like, that's because we're so,
Mm,
babe, it's because we're so enlightened, it's because we're so sensitive. And like somewhere along the path, I started picking up bits and pieces of tools that were more about initially emotional stuff, emotional healing, emotional cleanup. I didn't even have the shadow work idea yet, but like essentially starting to do more of a shadow work mentality where if something was a trigger, if something was a made me feel awful for reasons that made no sense, I would go and investigate and I would
mm,
use different tools like EFT tapping or kinesiology or whatever to sort of shift that. And then I would find like a month later, I could do that thing.
mm,
And it was like, this is amazing. And so I guess for me, this is kind of like emotional embodiment started to become a thing. And then I did a bunch of that. And then physical embodiment became more of an interest of like lifting weights, going to do movement stuff like free movement and kind of random trippy, you know, mobility training and spinal fluid and like stuff that would have not been at all interesting to me as like a ascension guy. I was like, fuck, if I can't learn how to move this body, what's even the point?
mm,
And so these different things started to fit together and I just started to see like, okay, I am growing spiritually just as much from coming down here more than I was from going up here. Maybe actually more. Maybe actually it's even more of a skill to open my power on planet Earth to be able to move my body, connect erotically, express my emotions, make money, put my will into it's like,
mm,
this is spiritual as well. And so I guess when I say embodied spirituality, I mean a form of awakening that encompasses the whole picture. I don't mean skipping the consciousness development either, but I sort of mean like, yeah, it ideally if we're going to open who we are, we're going to open across all levels. And to me, that should show up in your physicality. That should show up in your social command of your social environment. It should show, like I'm saying, should not, no
mm,
one should do anything, but ideally, if something is really working across many levels, I would want to see. growth across all these different
Mm,
levels of the being. So for me, embodied is a good word, because a lot of what we're doing is through physical practice, but also like it's like a holistic approach, I guess, is
mm,
also what we're talking about.
mm. Yeah, for sure. I find that a really helpful overview, I guess, for anybody who's sitting on the fence of more the Piscean era of things, which is God was up there and we meditate and we're trying to get somewhere and um, be in the ascension of life. And there's a beauty to that because there's a connection to the subtle and psychic attunement and more consciousness comes in. And I remember in the early days when I was realizing, oh, I'm not my thoughts, and oh, I'm not actually everything that's happening up here. There's a level of separation that I have from myself, which is really beautiful. But actually, having gone through very deep soul initiation and spiritual crisis myself over these years, I have seen the pitfalls of both ends of the spectrum, being too much in the ascension and actually having the sense that my psyche was actually so compressed. I got quite depressed. Like I lost actually the ability to, I wouldn't say lost, but I became separated from this ability to be rested in my personality. I got actually so hyper aware that there was some like deadening of life actually around me. Like I felt very self-aware and self-conscious and in my stuff all the time.
Mm. Mm.
And then the other side of it, which also happened, which was an important thing for me because I used to be like very militant and push myself incredibly hard. And I had to have my will rewired from the personality, which was like, I can just get up and get shit done all day, every day, and run 15 miles and la la la. And actually, when that fell away, because on a deeper level, what was happening was my will was being rewired from personality to desire to soul will, which is rooted in a much more different place. And also even the non-dual, which is maybe something we'll touch on. Basically, I had to collapse everything that I thought. And I had this period of time where I was like, shit, I can't do anything. Like I'm trying to pull up from my well of will and there's nothing here. Like now I'm useless. And I went pretty swampy and I wasn't exercising like I used to, and I wasn't connected with my body like I used to, and I just kind of got a bit sleepy. And so I think they're the pitfalls of the ascension and the descension path, but actually coming into deeper alignment and having them to knit together now over just I think the natural time it takes. In the teachings that we follow, it talks about an initiate going through a 3 to 5 year cycle. And I see that a lot. And that's definitely what happened for me, where the peak awakening years really spanned about 5 years of intensity. Um, give or take, it wasn't all a big roller coaster, but it was pretty up there. And I chose that as well. But having actually come out the other side and feeling what it is to be embodying my spirituality, bringing the tools that I've learned to kind of center myself and also just be in my matter, like feel rooted and grounded
Mm.
and
Mm.
yeah, work with the root as well. It's a game changer and I feel like awake and alert behind my eyes in a way that I don't think I have since like maybe before I even went to high school, like very, very long time ago before I got super conditioned.
Mm.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I wonder if you want to touch on the root. Like, yeah, I know your work works with this concept of the root or the base chakra and also the physicality of actually just being grounded in the root part of our body and how that can help us manifest stuff, get stuff done.
Yeah, I I've been, my first modality that I created was a chakra-based system. It was a adaptation of the chakras and loading some other information into them, like spiral dynamics and Dr. David Hawkins' work around states of consciousness and that kind of stuff. So I overlaid a lot of things, and through that lens, we can see the root, the base, which we can think of as the base of the spine, the legs, the feet, for sure, but also really I look at the nervous system as the root as well.
Mm,
And more metaphorically and elementally, it's the earth element. It's funny that I'm kind of this. teacher who's focused on that because in some ways it's been my weakest element, and in other ways I feel like I'm starting to really develop some degrees of mastery, and then in other times I'll be like, oh, I fucking suck at this realm, you know. But also I've developed a lot from where I started, you know. And I think, I mean, if we look at what's there, initially that's where all the codes around survival live, you know.
Mm.
It's kind of maybe for people unpleasant metaphor, but you know, when we in the old days when we would hang someone, they would often like shit themselves, you know. It's like that's the
Mm.
only moment they actually let go, you know. It's like, oh my
Mm.
God, he's
Mm.
been, you know, he's been asphyxiated and he's let
Mm.
go for the first time
Mm.
probably in 40 years, you know. Um, that base connection to the earth, um, that connection to nervous system regulation, you know, it governs so many things. It governs our relationship to financial wealth, at least as so far as financial wealth is related to survival. Like I think
Mm.
money ticks a few different levels, but it obviously has a lot to do with survival in our, you know, in our association systems. And I think there's something about starting to work with the base and the lower half of the body and
Mm.
grounding and earthing and those kind of things, which means playing with life and death forces, and it means unlocking the power that's in our kind of animal self, you
Mm.
know, whether that's um, through base like anal massage, whether that's through lifting heavy weights, you know, sometimes I've deadlifted and I have like a Kundalini shifting experience and it's like, oh my
Mm.
fucking God, that was crazy. And it's like, well, you had to harness everything
Mm.
to lift more than you've lifted before. And it's just like something shoots up the spine. It's like, fuck, I just did. It's like, yeah, you harnessed a little bit more of your full power in a physical
Mhm.
sense, you know?
Mm.
Um, I just don't think it's a level we can skip. You know, I think
Mm.
that's where we're at as a society, apart from people who are very in their bodies. And it's interesting, even you can even be an athlete or whatever, and have a good body connection in a way, but still have maybe not tapped into the power here, particularly not the spiritual power or the yeah, the power for awakening that's here. But I think we need to recognize that the asshole is as sacred as the crown of the head. You know,
Mhm.
if we at all expect to be a awakened sacred species, you know, then you know, like isn't it crazy beyond, you know, beyond the practical hygiene level that some parts of the body are just deemed like shameful and sinful and like wrong,
Mm.
and it's all the things that touch the ground face downwards are related to excretion or whatever. It's
Mm.
to me like I remember when I started really deconditioning a bit, and I'd sit there and I'd be like, how can we be have been around for maybe a couple million years and still think that? Like
Mm.
it's insane. It's so superstitious and crazy. But then it
Mm.
unlocks the whole thing you hinted at the beginning, which is like we are coded into up is good, down is bad,
Mm.
lighter is better, darker is worse.
Mm.
And then very quickly we can extend that to like um, the masculine is on top and the feminine is on the
Mm.
bottom. And, you know, let's just then take that into indigenous cultures, land, nature, darker skinned people, lighter skinned people. It's like there's a division between spirit and matter that's embedded very early in uh, philosophical frameworks that I think is probably one of the big roots of a lot of our dysfunction and suffering.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, that we draw a line and half of everything is bad.
Mm.
And I think that healing that can start at home with our own bodies. You know, that's a
Mm.
really great place to start.
Yeah, totally. And when I was tuning into this conversation, I mentioned to you at the beginning, the phrase that came was the ABCs of soul work. And I don't really know what
Mm,
that means. It's just the phrase that came. But something that I'm really interested in is, I guess, finding different ways to articulate the soul's journey, because everybody has their own experience of life, and some people might not even feel like they're connected to this idea of soul. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the personality, the soul, and the spirit because in the teachings we
Mm,
follow, there's these kind of three rings, and they all live inside of us, they all live outside of us, and they weave together. But a crucial way to kind of move through the soul's journey with intention and consciousness is to actually look at the places in us that have been separated, either from conditioning or religion or societal norms. This idea that I'm a man, therefore I'm this, or I will never look in the deepest, darkest chambers of my body or my psyche, apart from, when I'm a politician and I'm in the back of the woods with my pants around my ankles and I get caught. That there's so much to the human experience which becomes shelved in these pockets of what's acceptable and what's not. And a lot of the time, these pieces, they come up for us because actually my belief is that the soul is trying to bring us into deeper wholeness at all points of our life. Everything can be something taking us towards the steps of our own liberation if we want it to, if we're awake to it. And a lot of people aren't awake to it, and that's totally fine. And it can be quite painful to watch that from the outside, because actually seeing things through a different lens can mean we can move towards these thresholds in a way that they don't have to be so destructive or challenging. It can actually be like a breath of fresh air, like, oh, okay, I don't have to carry this wound about my mother the rest of my life. But it can be really challenging because I don't think that there's a very well understood or articulated framework for the broad majority of society about the fact that we have a personal self. We also have a soul, which is connected to the world's soul. And there's also the spirit that lives in every single part of us. And Indigenous cultures, they have it nailed. They know that if you stick a sword or a stake through a tree, that tree has feelings, and it's part of the fabric of life, and that has an outcome. But we're very disconnected from that. So yeah, there's a lot there, but I just wonder if you want to talk a little bit to the personality, the soul, and the spirit, and how you see all those things mixing together.
yeah, I mean, I'm quite shaped by Bruce Lyon's work and by Alice Bailey's work on these. And then I've kind of, like I said, I've come from a comparative religion background. So I've kind of taken that theosophical model and tried to look at it in different systems, and I spent a lot of time in Eastern religious systems and particularly non-dual systems where it's like, there's no soul. It's just this, and then you open to the thing. For a while, it took me a while to marry these. So I'll just share from where I am now,
Mm.
knowing that these teachings have definitely shaped how I see things, but also I'm finding they are matching and correlating to my embodied experience very strongly,
Mm.
especially of late, So the three rings model, Bailey calls it the three aspects of man. I really look at it like this. So the personality is who I think I am on the outside, the mental and physical construct and expression of me, my name, my Instagram and Facebook profile, my the values that run me, and the story of who I am in this life, and so on. We can call that the personality, and you know it's a collection of habits and responses and so on. And there's even like obviously the trouble with these models is you can zoom in and go, yeah, there's three levels, but actually there's seven levels within each one, and there's whatever. So we'll stick
Yeah.
to the three. But I would just say that, like, to me, the personality is kind of grafted on top of the animal. Like,
Mm.
if we were not conditioned in society, didn't go to school, didn't have you know the language we have and the experiences we have, and had less content baked into us, we might identify more as wild creatures. And I
Mm.
definitely feel like, you know, a little bit of rewilding has been part of my process to even
Mm.
get started. So, yeah, the personality is who we mentally identify as, just purely from the mind and the body's impulses. I see the soul as a spark of the divine that is separated yet knows itself to be part of the divine.
Mm.
So it's like the big self, um, I work a lot with ceremonial magic, and I'm still trying to crack whether the holy guardian angel is the soul or is it something else. But it sort of correlates to me that, like, the soul is the version of me that has lived many lives, is operating at a much higher frequency, has access to much more information and power, and is beyond the limitations of the body and the personality construct to a large extent. And so some of this stuff we've hinted at, of starting to collapse these polarities of men
Mm.
act like this and women act like this, or I am a tall white man, so I must do this, or whatever, like starting to break through some of those identity constructs really starts to create more space for us to be this higher vibrational, more loving, wiser, you know, almost immortal expression of ourselves. And I really feel that, like, this classic association of, if the personality is the earth, then the soul is analogous to the sun. And there is
Mm.
this brightness that comes when someone is really coming from soul. There is a brilliance to them, and
Mm.
a shine to them, and a radiance to them. And so then the spirit is beyond the soul. The spirit is essence itself. It's the one that we're all part of. And as we shift more towards spirit, or we have moments where both the personality and the soul is out of the way, it really feels like we're being navigated by life itself.
Mm.
And there's, to me, a deeper power again, and a more mysterious frequency as well. And obviously, in
Mm.
the realms we're working in, spirit, we would associate to the black hole, which is a beautiful metaphor or representation of this non-dual, darker and more mysterious and more gravitational energy. So to me, um, operating from pure spirit is much more, it's not radiant, it's dark and it's magnetic. It more draws
Mm.
things in a quiet, powerful way. And so, if we wanted to put it in like pop culture kind of meme language, it's like being a black hole inside an alien shoved inside an animal. And it's like, that's really one way to, or in an angel. It's like an angel shoved inside an animal with a black hole shoved inside of it. It all sounds very violent, but like, those are the three levels at which we can really start to look at things. And I think
Mm.
it can be very useful to start to identify, like, if you're around musicians and artists and poets, and there's this, and like activists and people who are more tapped into this heartfelt view of the world, of like, we should all be sharing,
Mm.
and everyone should be equal, and no one should be
Mm.
getting harmed, and we love all the animals. And it's like, yeah,
Mm.
that is a soul way of relating to the world.
Mm.
Whereas like the
Mm.
hard rationalist who's working in their office is like, that's impractical, that's bullshit. That is a mental,
Mm.
as a body mind construct of like, well, I don't see how that's going to happen. Let's get on with business, or let's, you know, provide for our families and climb the ladder and do the things that a mind wants to do. Whereas, and this can happen at various levels of maturity as well, but that call that comes through the heart is much more of a
Mm.
soul recognition, and
Mm.
is much more of a, like, you know, seeing through to the beauty in things. And
Mm.
um, so when we're getting interested in things like tantra and heart meditation, and purifying and healing the body, and becoming this ascension journey, becoming lighter and vibrationally more pure, quote unquote, that is the beginning of the soul awakening journey. And that
Mm.
typically is how it starts, is this, like, I'm not going to watch TV anymore. Did you know that the stuff they taught us in school isn't even true? And, I'm going to do yoga and meditate and eat vegetables, and,
Mm.
not be under the spell of the government or whatever. It's like that way awakening. To me, there's various qualities of that, some higher than others, but that is the beginning of soul
Mm.
awakening,
Mm.
and a lot more heart and care. And then that deeper, that non-dual, that spirit, or awakening to the mystery, it can often be much more impersonal, and this sort of
Mm.
recognition of, like, everything is unfolding perfectly anyway. Like, what does it
Mm.
mean? I remember having some of these awakenings first, actually, of like, doesn't even matter if everyone dies. Like, we're all just atoms and consciousness moving through that. Like, what difference does it make if the fucking tree gets cut down or everyone is murdered? Like, the universe is unfolding in perfection. And it's like to try to bring that back home was like, oh, that doesn't really sit with my human view. And
Mm,
I'll wrap in a second, but like I feel like something interesting that comes from that trans-Himalayan and sort of theosophical tradition is this idea that building the soul can be a really helpful bridge between the personal
mm,
and the non-dual spiritual. And that for me um, was a huge gift because I'd worked a lot more with Eastern radical awakening sorts of traditions that are just like pop your mind out of the way, pop yourself
mm,
open, and just see in the now it's all unfolding and there's nobody here. And you know that I had lots of those experiences, but they didn't really. I was trying to like, well, how do I stabilize it so I can have no
mm,
personality like Eckhart Tolle, so I can now talk like this for the rest of my life. And it just wouldn't happen. My personality would come back so quickly and easily. And I'm like, ah. And then starting to understand soul work and soul initiation helped me sort of see these gradual stages of, well, actually, first, I've got to awaken to being a soul in a body. And
mm,
then let's bring that solar energy into my emotional life and my erotic life. And then let's open that into my mind and my purpose. And then, and only then, the soul can open fully to spirit and that can happen in a stabilized way. And it gave me a
mm,
like, there's a series that can be worked through here. And I'm trying to kind of jump to the fourth or fifth rung of the ladder by cracking myself open with Zen meditation or whatever. And it's like, actually, that's not the piece that I need right now is opening my heart more and stabilizing
mm,
this soul frequency. So
mm,
yeah, a little bit of a tirade on how I relate to
mm.
those three levels at the moment.
No, it's good. It's good. It's a good overview. And I know that we both studied a lot with Janine Marie, and she talks about finding ground. And that's been a real kind of, I guess, game changer for me, actually. And I was also put words and a framework to an experience that I've had my whole life, which is feeling incredibly connected to nature and feeling like my access to spirit and my access to the purity of life force, actually, even from a child, came from feeling at one with nature. But as we go through these different thresholds of personal growth and initiation, and we awaken to the soul energies of the heart, which is incredibly loving, what happens is that part of us expands, and the parts of us that don't want to expand or are terrified of expanding can contract hardcore. And it can bring up things, traumas, places of healing, places of contraction, like places where we don't want to be loved, we don't want to be seen, like. And there's been, for me, different phases of different phases of embodiment, reaching a place of like, okay, I feel embodied now, and then actually realizing, fuck, I'm not embodied at all. I've got to go back.
Mm,
And
mm,
I love what you're saying about the stages of initiation, and that's also part of the teachings that we follow. Is there are different stages of initiation, and we're all of them all of the time. Just like in astrology, when someone's like, I'm a Cancer, la la la. I mean, I'm a Cancer moon, and I'm quite attached to all the Cancer in my chart, and I kind of use it as an excuse a lot for how much of a crybaby I am. But it's good not to get attached to this idea of I'm this fixed point. Actually, I'm all of it,
mm,
and like let's keep breaking that down. So with regards to the stages of initiation, we're all on all of the stages all of the time, or so it says in the teaching, but there are definitive stages where we're mostly placed in that place. And as you're saying, the first one is starting to realize, well, maybe I don't want to live this life. Maybe I don't want to be told what I have to do and be in the conditioning, and maybe I want to go vegan, and maybe I want to save the animal kingdom, and maybe I get really disciplined about my health and my wellness and the things you mentioned. And then coming through the stages helps us ground more soul into us to a place where we reach where um, ideally we're at least 66% kind of above board, which is we know we've got this emotional body and we know we have these personal desires and fears and projections and, places that are like about whatever, but we're not so identified with them that we can't separate ourselves. So, in practical terms, if somebody really upsets you or pisses you off, there's more spaciousness to come back from the knee-jerk reaction, because actually there's a deeper resting in a more soulful place, which can see more of the bigger picture. And that's just one example. And then, yeah, coming into, as you say, more spirit. Yeah, I love that you're bringing in the mystery, because there is this like allure. And what I see a lot is there comes a time when like enough soul work's been done that there's like a thirst and a hunger for something else. And it's like, I just want the mystery, or I want the dark, the non-dual. Like I'm feeling drawn to this person, but it doesn't make any sense. I feel called over here. It doesn't make any sense. I feel like I need to leave my business or leave this country or leave my community, and it doesn't make any sense. And without enough grounding on the path, I do feel it can bring up some of those radical awakening tendencies, which is like too much too soon, too hard too fast. And because the mind, especially in our society, wants to know what's happening, opening yourself to the mystery is scary because it's inherently mysterious. So I wonder if you could give like some practical examples. You mentioned about what you're doing, landing your temple. Maybe that's something we could touch on as a practical example of the personality has its desires, the soul might have its purpose, and spirit might have something different into the mix. And how do we surrender to it without railroading over our personality, which is a core piece of the puzzle? Like a lot of spiritual traditions, I think, or there's kind of some dogma in some fields of the personal self being less than. And actually, I just think that that's really toxic. And actually, we need like a vital, alive, thriving, flourishing personal self, which is listened to, so that we can be in soulful expression, so that we can be danced by the mystery of life, but not get so bogged down in our need for safety and security and comfort and ideas of self that actually we lose the grand vision of the bigger picture. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I think, for me, I definitely, in the last while, I often seem to be someone who will take a stand for the integration of the personality more so than the annihilation of the personality, although sometimes it does need to get annihilated a little bit. It can be really helpful, but that's not a permanent solution in my experience, and I guess partly why what's been interesting for me, I'll go on a slight tangent, but I trust it'll kind of support. For a long time, I felt like my magical study and my draw to the sort of mystery school work, they felt like they were at odds for quite a long time. And I would say last year and then definitely this year, I've come into a reality where, they're not. They're utterly, they're like the two sides of the kind of Ida Pingala. They're like two things that just go together perfectly, actually, and ultimately lead to the same place and support each other. But where I'm going with that was because I had sort of had this kind of magic worldview, magic with a K, as written on my actual face. You know, that journey begins very honoring of the personality. You know, at its most immature reading of the magical path, do what you fucking want. Basically, that's it. That's like the most ignorant read of Aleister Crowley's work, right? It's like, do as thou wilt, which is not really what it sounds like. But it initially sounds like, yeah, I do what I want to fucking do, and that's a lot of where my personal development journey came from. Was I really felt this sense of willful, well, I should be able to do what I want, and that led me to need to heavily decondition myself so I could do what I want. Interestingly, the more I went after what I wanted, the more kind of deconstruction and evolution happened. And the more I started finding myself in situations where I'd manifested the thing that I want, but it really felt like life had almost manipulated me to be in this situation to receive the thing that it wanted me to have And so I was like, well, who really wanted this in the first place anyway?
Mm.
Did I want this? And who even am I? Because aren't I just a speck? Aren't I just a drop in the ocean? So there was a real head fuck for me around what I'm trying to say is I have very much honored and indulged my personal desires quite deeply. And
Mm.
I've seen that as a path to enlightenment or something. And that's given me a slightly different perspective than a lot of the mystic sort of people that I meet that are, for better or worse, very very small self-denying.
Mm.
And this can bring beautiful generosity and humility and surrender is something that they have. But what am I trying to say? If we don't learn to integrate these parts and get them to sort of cooperate with each other, the whole process gets stuck.
Yeah.
And so there's plenty of places where you could be on the edge of a breakthrough and your personality is going to kick off like a little baby or a toddler that doesn't want to get taken to the doctor or a kid that doesn't want to go to the first day of school and becomes incredibly resistant and heavy and noisy and dramatic. And that typically shows up when we have been heavy-handed from one level or another trying to force
Mm.
something through. And actually what I think the mastery is moving between these levels and adjusting them and integrating them and working on little bits back and forth until they all start to seamlessly cooperate with each other. And
Mm.
I'm in a place in my life where there are definitely not every moment of every day. I'm not going to claim that just yet, but like there's a lot of periods where it's like, this feels like this is the universe unfolding, but it's my sole purpose. And this is exactly what I fucking want. And
Mm.
it's like, how can that even be possible? And it's like, because you've been teaching these pieces to dance with each other
Mm.
for ages, and then
Mm.
sometimes it's more like, okay, I've been guided by some mysterious thing and I have no fucking idea what I'm doing here. And to be honest, I don't really want to be here. And I don't know if this is my sole purpose, but I've definitely been called to something powerful. And other times is much more like an overflow of heart and purpose and service that is much more of a soul thing. And other things have definitely been, well, this is what I fucking wanted, and now we're doing it. And
Mm.
yeah, it feels like it's lacking in some of those other qualities. And none of those three situations to me is the ideal situation.
Mm.
And but for me, I've just talked to where I don't, where I'm at in the journey. What's been tricky has been kind of trying to resolve this sort of schizophrenia of having all these parts kind of online in different quantities at different times, and listen and wait and engage with little bits of different things and feel like, oh, this isn't it, and really come to the understanding that this is just a model and it's just a map. And
Mm.
actually, what I really want is just deep alignment
Mm.
and forgetting all the models and the maps of who is on what level or whatever. I want to move through the world with a sense of deep alignment. And in
Mm.
that place, something really interesting happens where like deep surrender and deep willfulness are actually happening at the same time.
Mm.
And it's like, and it's very beautiful, especially having journeyed parts where they're all jostling and they're not quite, and my personality doesn't know how to gracefully open to these bigger forces. And, whereas now it just feels like my personality has to a large part learned that it gets all the things it wants if it hitches a ride on the fucking cosmos doing what it wants. Like, it's like, ah, and I guess the tricky part has been having enough holes broken into it. And for me, it's been death, like personal death, my dad, my friend, a mentor, like all in a quite short time after the mystery school experiences. It really just finished the job of some of the
Mm.
soul initiation work that had begun. It was just like, okay, this is a ritual that cannot be escaped. This is a process that is not, I can't tap out of it. It's here. And I just have to surrender through these parts. And I found on the other side of that, um, there's a lot of spaciousness for all these different bits to actually be the same thing a lot of the time. I don't know if that
Mm.
even makes any sense or whatever, but because I'm kind of working through my own process explaining it. But
Mm.
yeah, that's how I'm experiencing it right now. And I think, I guess in the practical side of it, if I was a person a couple of years ago from where I am now, trying to figure out how to fucking work with this, I would have a little bit of medicine for my personal, a little bit for my soul, and a little bit for the non-dual spirit
Mm,
part. You know,
mm,
meaning some kind of emptiness meditation, some maybe some heart meditation, and really working on the vision of the world that I feel is possible, and also really making sure that I have self-actualized and I have handled relationships, purpose, money, body, like that shit. Again, I don't think you can fully skip it. Like maybe you can, but it
mm,
certainly seems to work a lot better if um, we've somewhat developed our body mind reality, and because then
mm,
these things, these bigger forces can come through a functional human. Because when it comes through a
mm,
not that functional human, it's a lot of glitches, you know?
mm. Yeah, totally. It's like sometimes we've got to go back and pick up the pieces from the earlier stages that actually we couldn't have got then. And in the
Yeah.
context of work or professionalism, like I feel super grateful that I had a really, really high pressure career and I was a high performing, functional, professional person. So now when it comes to creating my business and moving more into soul entrepreneurship, I've got so much to learn about marketing and reels and all the stuff that actually you're really great at. So maybe we touch on that either another time or here or whatever. Um, so there's a lot to learn, but I do feel like kind of similar to what I talked about at the beginning when I lost my personality will, because I'm now deeper in alignment and there is this kind of weaving of soul, spirit, and personality. I can really show up and get stuff done.
Hmm.
I'm not
Hmm.
railroading over myself, but I'm clear on where I'm going. I'm clear on my focus, and I have a lot of capacity to really get stuff done in the world because I train that muscle, um, working very hard as a young person, and I'm really grateful for those skills because it means I can navigate the world actually. And I also have a sense of what's my mastery and what's not. Like I'm not going to do my own taxes because I'm shite at money. I'm not shite at money, but I'm shite at math. So there's like I think there's a level of development that has to come in that's like how do we actually manifest all this in form? And definitely a lot of it's not just professional, but relational experience, moving through our
Yeah.
traumas, being able to
Yeah.
communicate, being able to work with our sexuality, like you talked at the beginning, having a connection to Eros, which is sustainable and fortifying and isn't like glitchy and jumping up and down. Like actually really supports all of these pieces to come together and for us to emerge in the world in I guess a more fulsome way. Mm. 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 The word trust was coming to me a lot when you were speaking. That actually we can, like tease apart all these different terms and forms, and like you said, the different frameworks and architecture of all these teachings. But actually, there's like a deeper rest in my body when it's like, can we just sit back into the trust actually of the soul's journey and it unfolding as it's supposed to be? Mm,
Yeah. And like bigger than any of these components we're identifying, which is obviously just a mental way of looking at things, what I tend to really listen to now is that there's a lot of juice in the form of physical energy, emotional excitement, focus for certain things. I take that as a strong indicator. It's like
mm,
whatever language you want to use, but it's like I'm plugged into the cosmos and it gives me a lot of juice, a lot of energy for things that I'm meant to be doing, and it gives me less and less the things that I'm not really meant to be doing.
mm,
And it, if I really find that I'm kind of like trying to force myself to do something, I would typically pause and reflect and spend time meditating, moving, reconnect, making sure I'm plugged in. But if I'm in a good place and it's things that just are not moving, I would typically step back and drop what I'm doing a lot quicker than I would have used to, because it's typically not resistance or whatever. It's often like not, and it might just be like, not right now. This is not the exact moment to do this, you know?
Mm,
And often it's weird. I'll go and attend to something else like creative expression or working on my house and doing this thing, and then I'll come back to that thing a week later and it just flies. And it's like, oh,
mm,
some part of me was going, don't, not now. And I'm like, no, no, but this needs to happen. And it's a mental conditioning. This needs to happen right
mm,
now. And once I drop that, I find myself pulled to something else, and that thing, seemingly unrelated, frees something up in me. And then there's just more of me on board to do whatever this thing is, whether it's working on the business or it's getting this some administrative thing done. It's like, you don't understand, this needs to happen. And it's like, it's just quicker and quicker to notice where is the current,
mm,
basically. At the end of the day, taking maps and models and categories out of it, just tracking where the current of
mm,
aliveness is really gives me a lot of information. It could be the same
mm,
about a personal connection of there's something between us and we come towards it and it's like, oh, it's not sex. Maybe we're meant to be friends. Maybe we're meant to do a project. Maybe, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, what is this energy moving? And not trying to like pigeonhole it into
mm,
whatever I thought it was. And like my life is like that a lot now,
mm,
where it's just like I was trying to configure something and it's just not working, and I drop it. Sometimes I have to journal to get something out of my mind. Something. What am I attached to here? What am I obsessing with? And it's often like reframing back the other way. Like, what if I didn't care about the money? And it's just like, there you go. And it's like,
mm,
an old bit of conditioning of you need to do X, Y, Z was blocking my receptive capacity. And once that gets out of the way, it's like boom, and it's like, okay, it
mm,
really feels like the universe is backing me right now, and
mm,
that
mm,
having enough references of that feeling make it so that like, well, I'd prefer to be in that feeling as much as possible, and it does have a quality of being used, you know. And so
mm, mm,
this old magic versus the mystery thing, it's like magic is the skill set of living your life in cooperation with the mystery. At this point, it's
mm.
starting to look, whereas it used to look like, can I push, I'm going to push the universe around, and it's like, you're not really doing that. You're tricking yourself into thinking you're doing that, but now it's more like, cool, what part of me do I need to get out of the way so the fullness of what's available could come through? It's the
Mm,
same stuff, the same practices, but it's applied in a way of like, I'm just trying to channel the full ocean, you know,
mm,
not be trying to do it as a drop or a cup of water. It's like, let me feel the power of being the full ocean, and if possible, I'd like to channel it over there. And if that's possible, it'll happen. And if it's not possible, it's clear that that's not really the thing.
mm,
Um, yeah, but I feel like you've mentioned, you know, these cycles take a while, and I feel it's very pleasant to feel often now things unfolding so effortlessly when there's been such deep
mm,
frustration and such hard bits of the path. And sometimes that's just how it needs to be. I think you have to struggle sometimes to break through things,
mm,
but um yeah, to me, I do feel like I'm working with spirit and spirituality in a way that is deeply rewarding, and
mm,
that includes all levels, you know.
mm, mm. Yeah, that's really beautiful to hear the rewards that come through the hard grafting to unpeel the layers, but also the sweetness of the surrender. And it does take a level of development to be able to get out of our own way so that we're not grasping to
Yeah,
try and force things to happen. But I definitely know for myself that, I mean, I've had it a lot in the last 6 months. A lot of the projects I said yes to have crumbled. And instead of being like, I'm kind of like, interesting. And actually, what is revealing is what my intuition was kind of telling me is like a different orientation. And all of that is just really good data. Like I'm really
yeah,
grateful for it all. And actually there's a feeling of relief when truth is there, because it's kind of like, well, can't argue with that, like
yeah,
that's actually what's true. Like when the life disappears, it's like someone has just put out the candle flame, and instead of trying to light the match and start it again, it's like, their life's gone. And it doesn't mean
Yeah.
that we don't love each other or this or that or whatever, but the life is gone, and being able to be with that. And then sometimes it's excruciatingly tender, like especially in the context of a relationship. It's like, but I don't want to, and da 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 da. But actually, just yeah, feeling the flame like disappearing, and maybe it'll pop up again somewhere else. And yeah, I love that you said, and I've talked about this before, this idea that the trust muscle expands. And the more data we get, the more the trust muscle can
Yeah.
expand, the easier it gets actually to trust in that unfolding.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of the work that's happened for my ego is no less of an ego. It's a little more fluid and a little more flexible, but it's still it's still a mediating, trying to get what it wants, trying to make things work mechanism. But it's just learned. Often it's easier for it to hitch a ride on you know the soul and the cosmos than trying to like force. It's like okay,
Mm,
but because there's been enough examples of bigger forces coming through that it's like well, this is part of what we do, and it's like being a musician or an athlete or whatever, like you cultivate your instrument so that you can not be there when it matters. So it's
yeah.
like when you get up and sing, you're not there, you're just having
Mm,
a thing come through. Or when you get
mm,
up and perform something physically, it's like okay, I worked the personality works very hard to be able to get out of the way on
mm,
game day or whatever. And it's like I feel like that's the training of a magician or a mystic is like, yeah, I still have, when I still go to the shops, I talk to the person when we're doing temple landing, and the amount of fucking banter and nonsense going on is a lot, but there's also deep moments where that just disappears and it's
mm,
empty, and it's like, this is this is the current level of personal soul void integration, and it's a lot more fluid than it was a few years ago for sure.
mm, mm. Yeah, I love that. I feel like there's lots more we could kind of jump off into, but I know we've been talking for a while, and I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to share before we wrap up and maybe continue a deeper conversation in another realm, another time.
Nothing really, and I don't feel like hardcore like plug things, but if people are interested in my flavor of this stuff, just follow me on Instagram, like I'm talking about my journey a lot, and there's things that I do to help people with their soul purpose work and teaching magic and other stuff, and that you can find all that. But basically that I want to really support people who are on this path at some point.
Mm,
If you're on this path and you want someone to help, I have ways that I'm offering that I can do that. And also just I share my journey a lot, and that's seems to be really beneficial for some people because I
mm,
unpack and analyze the fuck out of myself often. And like, yeah, I'm here for that.
mm. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, great to chat to you, and we'll resume another time.
Great. Look forward to it.
Mm.